Hey, coaches. Looking forward to diving into session 23. We're going to be taking a look at a light update and some common Q&A with this session. So as we get into flow, here's some updates and Q&A that hopefully will be helpful to the crew here. Let's see, starting off with the updated wheel. I do, after years of using this wheel, I do prefer the simpler snapshot of the 6 elements that you'll see in the content. So you might consider using that one more than the other. I think there's some overlap with the other versions. So this is just my preferred one. The other version might provide a broader snapshot. So totally up to you what you prefer to use. Just keep in mind as you're using either version, if you use this as like a wheel or exercise, it's important to make it a snapshot, not stay too long in the resource. But yeah, this is the one I prefer. And I'm often asked, how do you measure challenge? And I think this is, what I say here can be applied to all of the different versions of or all the different elements of this wheel. Um, Clarity, achievability, challenge, agency, and maybe even ability to focus won't necessarily be optimal at a 10 out of 10. This is a different wheel. Sometimes I prefer to call it like a flow circle or something like that. So it doesn't create that sense that it needs to be perfectly well rounded. Um, we're just visualizing these different elements. So challenge, oftentimes a client might prefer a 5 to 6 out of 10. Others might really prefer an 8 out of 10. And so I don't want to plant the seed that it needs to be a 5 out of 10. Instead, I just want to be careful about the question I ask. So, like with the general wheel of life, financial, career, personal development, physical well being, all those kinds of things, we tend to ask on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you in these areas? With the wheel, the flow circle, I should say, it's, I think, best just to ask on a scale of 1 to 10, how clear, how achievable, how challenging, how much agency do you feel you have? On that can like ask just generally on a scale of 1 to 10. And after they're done, they can reflect back on what stands out to them. So if they say, yeah, like we go through the wheel and you ask, what are you learning? What are you recognizing as you reflect on the wheel circle? Uh, if they say, yeah, challenge is a 7 out of 10, and it's a lot. Okay. And that might be too much. Then what would it take to make it a 6? If they say, yeah, it's a 7 out of 10, and I'm kind of feeling stagnant. Okay, well, what would it be like to have like a 9 out of 10 challenging experience in your work? So we're just basing our response, our exploration around whatever they highlight, rather than driving them towards a 10 out of 10. We're just letting them respond. How clear is this? It's a 5 out of 10. We go around what it stands out to you. And then if they highlight something like clarity or achievability and they have a medium score, whatever their response is, we help them explore up and down the scale instead of advocating. That goes along the lines of something else that we'll see. How much should the coach push towards optimal? Well, we can't really define optimal. This is a way, what I like about this experience is it helps the client articulate what they mean by an optimal experience. Because I think as coaches, we can tend to push towards the concept of flow, and they might not want to be in a constant state of flow. They might want to decrease the level of challenge and be able to have a little bit more relaxing, um, and then pop back up to flow from time to time. So it's important to follow their lead and not to lead them with the question of, um, with the questions that we use here. So timelessness is a bit of the exception here. Um, but yeah, all of the questions can really be just on a scale of 1 to 10, even with timelessness. On a scale of 1 to 10, how quickly does time pass? How often do you experience timelessness? But that one, it's kind of, I don't know. In my opinion, it's ideal for that to be a 10. But even still, sometimes maybe a client would even want that to be something like a 7 or 8. Okay. Main thing there, sorry, a bit of a ramble. Main thing is let the client lead. Don't drive at a 10 out of 10 on those. Just ask basic questions and then reflect afterwards. How realistic or right is it to push the client to flow? And I think I'm often asked this question, and I think even the question itself is somewhat going to lead directly to the answer, because the exploration of the flow concept or engagement should be always done in service of the client's agenda. And so part of the exploration is saying, what do you want? What do you want to see in terms of this idea of being fully engaged or experiencing the right level of challenge and the right level of skill usage, and how often you're in that peak flow experience? What, how much do you want to be there? Um, how fully engaged do you want to be in your work right now? And this way, the coach is following rather than advocating for the flow state, because sometimes the client wants to be able to do really well in their work, but also have plenty of energy after their work so that they can, you know, be building this thing on the side or dedicate their time and their energy towards family. And so we don't want to push them to 10 out of 10 flow state in their work all the time, because that's not, that's not necessarily going to be their definition of success. How to know when do I share the concept? If they're less clear in the future and they want to be, again, what's their agenda? They don't see a path forward to promotion and they want to see that path. They're lacking motivation and ambition, and they're not happy with that state. Sometimes a client is, they're done climbing the corporate ladder. They have 3-5 years, and they don't want to just skate along doing nothing, but they don't have the same ambition, and they're not sure what to use the coaching for, especially if it's provided by the company. What am I supposed to do? I feel like I'm getting great reviews and I want to maintain these things, but I feel like I'm confident in maintaining my level of performance for the next 3 years to retirement. What do you expect I use this coaching for? In those cases, you might look up like session 45. We have the PERMA or flourishing wheel. You also have the general wheel of life, where you can reset expectations or set fresh expectations around the next 6 months or the length of the contract, and help them consider, as they zoom out, what they might like to work on with the coaching. Because sometimes it's not having a better drive towards the next promotion if they're kind of done with that. So if they're not happy with the state, then flow might be a good way to reflect on engagement. And if they're getting feedback that they're lacking motivation or engagement, we could use flow not necessarily to drive them to address the feedback like we are like on the feedback side, but rather it can help them take a bit of an inventory of their experience. Then they can reflect on what they might want to change. If they do feel they're fully engaged, then sometimes that leads to a different path of the coaching. Instead of finding more sense of flow or engagement, it could be better showcasing, better communication generally, or reaching out and understanding where the impression might be coming from, or getting like 360 feedback that gives a more detailed explanation of what's being pointed out, because it could be impression management instead of actual lack of engagement. Client doesn't want to grow in work, but does want to grow in other areas. Session 45, like I said, is a good one for that. Flourishing. It looks at all the different tools in the program. As you get to that final phase of the program, we'll be taking a look at a lot of different resources, and just how to remember what resources to use, since there's so many there. So you might take a look at that content ahead of time. Client doesn't want to grow in work, but does want to grow in other areas. What do? Follow the client, help them pursue their growth and goals. And from time to time, so if you're exploring flourishing, exploring the regular wheel in those non-work related areas, even as they grow in those areas, you can still ask relevant questions of, as you've stepped up and demonstrated courage in this area of your life, how might you demonstrate that same courage in your work? What impact might it make if you brought these lessons over here that we've been focusing on and apply it to your leadership as part of your work, or something like that? So cross-pollination is a good thing to do and should be done, especially when you have like a corporate sponsor contract. You're not demanding that they focus on getting the promotion, but you're helping them consider how the value from the coaching and their life outside of work might benefit their work as well. How long would the flow wheel take or circle? Roughly 5 to 10 minutes. With any of these kinds of exercises, I believe it's best to do a quick snapshot. So if they have, they're going through and they get to challenge and they say, yeah, it's really about a 5. Yeah, I guess it's a 5. I think in that case, the coach should say, wow, sounds like there's something there. Let's, if it's okay, let me make a note, and I want to come back to this moment. Would it be okay if we just quickly went around the rest of the circle? It's a very reasonable thing because that going around the rest of the circle might take another 30 seconds. And then right after that moment, the coach says, okay, well, you had that moment around challenge. What are you noticing from that moment or overall as you're looking at your responses or your circle here? I do think that's a better use of the tool because you're wanting to get this holistic look, and then you can step away from facilitating and just go back into coach mode. And I think that's the risk. If a coach just keeps coaching around each element, then they stay in charge the whole session. Ideally, this is 5 to 10 minutes. We're done. We have the next, maybe the final 30 minutes of session just to explore their reaction and where that reaction takes them. Yeah, and for the breakouts that you'll do for session 23, that's really important. Ideally, you'll have 20 or more minutes for your breakouts. The wheel should only take a third, or sorry, a fourth or maybe a third of that time, because you'll both, like, you might pitch it, but the process should be even faster since it's not with a regular client. So try not to take too much time so that you can get back into pure coach mode. Next up, how much background should I introduce? And this is my guidance from almost any concept from the training or any concept from your own experience. What you'll see with session 24 is leveraging your own expertise into a tool and resource. So this is also important to keep in mind there. Most of the time, coaches should minimize their explanation or their time as a teacher in the session as they share various tools. So if you share this, it usually would sound like, hey, there's this tool that we can look at to get a bit of a snapshot of that sense of engagement that you're wanting to improve. It leverages different elements of what's called flow. A lot of coaches, we look at engagement and motivation from this lens of flow, how challenging a thing is, a task is, our work is, and how well prepared we feel to do that work. And ideally, we're at an optimal stretch zone. So yeah, there's this like wheel we could use or circle we could use to explore that, take a snapshot of how engaged you might be with these different elements. How comfortable are you with us using that kind of resource here today? That's as much as I need to say. Like, if they ask for questions, I can give a bit more explanation. But ideally, I can send concepts and resources after the session if they are particularly interested. Just don't want to take too much time in that teacher mode. Okay, quick session 24 reminder as we wrap up the Q&A here. I do often get questions because I usually talk about, we talk about the session 24 experience ahead of time. So just remember to prepare ahead of time, especially now because session 23 is right before 24. Prepare ahead of time so you're ready to share one of the 2 question sets or tools from your work. And like I always say, the more work you put in, the more you get out of session 24. And it can be really helpful for managing lower readiness clients that you might get in sponsored coaching, where they're wanting your expertise, but instead of giving them direct expertise, you kind of distill your expertise into a tool or question set. And that allows you to stay in that coach role as you coach around that resource. It can also be a great way to sell coaching because the tools and resources are guided, facilitated exploration of certain topics. And if those topics are really relevant for your ideal client, then it can be just a good a good way to show that you are comfortable exploring their areas of focus. You'll see a developmental delegation sample. I use it quite a bit. It's from years of coaching new directors who are uncomfortable with delegation. So we have that as a sample, but that's not like what you need to build. You need to build something that's helpful to you. It could be from the content, the videos, but it really doesn't have to be from the videos. It can be something that comes from your background, your expertise. So make sure it's more focused on your client experience, what you want for them, make it useful to you and to them, to your clients. It does need to be some sort of in session resource, though, and not something you send afterwards. It's not that that's fine. It's just more the exercise for next week is focused on creating an in session resource or exercise question set tool. And it can really just be a rough draft. Some people will come with something really pretty, really well fleshed out, and that's great. And you might come with just 5 questions in series to explore a particular concept. You don't even have it visualized. Totally fine. Rough draft. We'll be able to share, get some feedback. That's session 24 for next week or next session. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Look forward to hearing how things go with session 23 or seeing you in class. Thank you for coaching.